Didn't even bring up any coffee for this after hours. Hello, everybody. We are here with the great Mr. George and talking with you all wonderful people about whatever you'd like to talk about tonight. A lot of crazy things going on in the world, including my volume being up over there. And so that would have come through any minute now. Seaver is on the ball as always, saying entropy, good brother. Well, thank you so much. There's the great Roy Danton over there on No White Guilt channel. Glad to see you all. How are you doing, Mr. George?
I am well, thank you. I don't have my water here too, so I'll have to do it without any stimulants.
All you have is water, or you don't have any water?
All I have is water, but that's all right. That's actually the usual for me, so I'm okay.
We're going to hear just a brief moment of sound.
All I have.
There we go. Now it's gone. Entropy should be up and running, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know if you have any issues with that. Yes, no stimulant. Well, I guess probably 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time would be a tough time to start drinking a bunch of coffee. Although I know people that can drink, start chugging away this time of night, and doesn't seem to affect them. And I think it probably at some point in the past affected me a lot less than it does now. But if I start drinking coffee, then I'm going to be in trouble for the rest of the night. But I see a lot. There's the great Mrs. Jess Horst is here. Big hello to you.
There's that delicious water. You sounded like a doctor when you said, we're just going to hear something for a second here. Like you were taking us through a procedure. Yeah, that's when entropy starts up, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. We are doctors of a sort, aren't we? We are healing the white rays of our ails. So many of them as well, including...
I have all of my degrees on the wall behind me.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's right. So what do you all want to talk about tonight? Any questions?
Yeah, it's open-ended. Yes. It's open-ended. It's just us again. We had a fun one last week. It was kind of all over the place. Touched on serious stuff. Touched on some silly stuff about marine mammals. Oh, we can talk about what we want to name our walrus mascot.
There's Fernell. Great to see you. Well, I will tell you all this. I just got back from a absolutely magnificent and very productive and exciting dinner with Jeff Winston of White Art Collective. And we were talking about some big things for 2020. There are a lot of plans, and there's a lot of challenges to accomplish these things. They're very ambitious goals, very exciting. I mean, there was no denying anyone at the restaurant would have looked at us and thought, those guys are planning something big, some sort of a bank heist or something.
I hope you were at a low-lit booth in the back of the restaurant and out of earshot of people.
No, in fact, I was speaking quite, loudly because it was boisterous in there, and it's so refreshing. Now, of course, I'm not going to say anything that is going to cause the vagues or anti-whites, I guess more specifically anti-white, violent anti-whites, from hearing what we have to say and then suddenly deciding, well, we're going to have to go break some beer bottles over these guys' heads or something of this nature. I didn't want to get Jeff into a brawl, but I do talk about white well-being out loud, believe it or not, and it is so refreshing.
No, I believe that more the plans and
yes. Oh, like no, nothing. No, I think we were. We certainly didn't give anything away. Let's put it that way. But we were talking about some big plans, but it is refreshing to be able to speak about white well-being, to be able to be white positive with folks who, when you say something white positive, they don't immediately go, "Oh God," And see, this is the thing that is so telling of the reality in Western civilization, is that we respond this way. Our people respond this way. That is all the evidence you need. And this is why I say, ladies and gentlemen, the anti-whites know it. The vagues know it. Everyone knows it. They're just trying to live by this anti-white narrative, this fiction of the universe. They all know that white people don't run anything for the well-being of white people. They endorse this and they believe this because it satisfies their sick revenge fantasies, revenge that they've invented in their own minds, because they have concluded that they are victims because they have things to be jealous and envious about, rather than just participants in a grand play that they can choose to play to the best of their abilities or not, or to be malefactors, which is what they choose to be. So the fact that, I mean, if the anti-white narrative were true, then surely I could say out loud in this restaurant for all to hear about serving white well-being and doing things for ourselves, and no one would be able to do anything because white people run everything, and you just can't. It's the man, and it's all about resisting the man, and there's all of this nonsense that these anti-whites spout in their anti-white narrative. In fact, the moment you begin saying these things with most white people, they know that it's heresy. And it is like, in the middle of medieval Europe, and you begin talking about devil worship, in the public square, and they go, "Oh my God, you're going to be crucified for this. You're going to be actually burnt at the stake for these things." So they immediately go, "Oh my God." Not even a flinch, this guy, Jeff. Not even a flinch. I'm loud. I'm talking about white well-being and anti-whites, and not because I'm testing Jeff or because I'm trying to get people to look at me, but because the place is loud and I have to talk loud to be able to be heard just across the table. But I tell you, it's funny because big salute to Jeff too, to not even be in the least bit phased. That's the sign of a man. So good on you, Jeff.
Did you feel like you were on a stream, but you were across from the person? Jeff is obviously someone that we've spoken to a bunch of times now on a bunch of different shows. He's been on the After Party. Yes. He's been on After Party specials. He's been on his Late Night Somewhere. We've been on a couple of What Are Collective shows, which, by the way, all that is on the afterparty.tv. Yes. It's all cataloged for you. But did it feel like a live version of a live stream, an in-live version of a live stream?
It felt a little like that. I have to say. It would have been.
You're supposed to bring any super chats, though.
No, we're having to give money away.
Right, it works the other way.
But the little that we have, and I'll tell you in a moment about that. But it was, I would have been fine with a camera on me the whole time. I guess some of these things I would want to keep a bit arcane and mysterious that we're planning and thinking about, because we have some exciting, this is the thing, very ambitious goals, but they are ambitious goals for sober people. So there's a big difference between ambitious goals for sober people, for serious people, and ambitious goals or juvenile goals for silly and juvenile people. So these are things that can be accomplished, but they're going to take a hell of a lot of effort, and we're going to continue working in that direction. So we are very excited. I see Misty's here. Hello to you. And I saw a couple questions go by. I'll get back to those.
So Vol Hollywood's not going to start next month.
No, not next month, but we are
maybe the month after.
Yes, I would definitely just generally, I will say, keeping it a bit arcane here, a bit ambiguous, is that we are, I definitely want to have conferences of the type that I have always desired and envisioned. And the very brief history of that is, and then I'll get back to what happened at the very beginning of this meal, talking about money, is that but way back when I first started participating, every single conference you went to, or you could go to, virtually everyone was identical, and they were all like collegiate level classes. They had to, if you didn't act like the most erudite and most sophisticated universities on planet Earth, then you just were not going to be taken seriously. And there was also this approach, and it persists, and it will persist probably until, I guess, a lot of these folks pass on to the next life. And that is that if we always present ourselves as scholars, and if we always speak in the language that the anti-whites say is acceptable language, well, then we will be taken seriously, and our ideas will be granted legitimacy. And Christ Almighty, this has never happened. Anyhow, so you would go to these conferences, and imagine me, an 18-year-old young man, and very action-oriented, and you go into these conferences, and it's just like going into a college classroom, except now this is the conference room, and you have some fossil waddle up to the lectern and begin to speak in this monotone voice, soporific as a speech can be, sleep-inducing as a speech can be, and go on for an hour and a half, even longer. And you're just sitting there, it feels like it never ends. And it does never end. And then that person finally finishes. Sometimes they take a few questions, but usually not back in the day. And then that person would go sit down, and whoever is MC will come up and say, well, that was a fabulous speech, wiping the sleep away from the eyes. And then now let's have somebody else who is as soporific as that person come up and speak for another hour and a half. And you just would sit through all of this. And I thought, this is dreadful. We need to have something that incorporates certainly some measure of academic legitimacy, because the facts and truth are all on our side, no doubt. But they should be relevant, not just this another appraisal, another examination of this point in history or that point in history, and as though something tangible could be taken out. It's like you go to these different points in history and they're so inapplicable. It's like trying to find something on Mars that will serve us right. It's just ridiculous. And I really felt like I was at times like I was in another universe watching this giant error.
Or maybe in one of the kids in Peanuts when they don't understand the adults.
Yes. And so anyhow, I began to question, and there was a very small contingent at first, and then we grew, and we said, come on, this is not the right way. We got to have a conference where one of the main things people want to do is they want fellowship. They don't just want to sit through academic lectures all day long. And so finally, after year after year after year of cajoling and persuading and coercing and begging and pleading people who are holding these conferences, we finally got it so that, okay, well, we'll have these very short breaks at the end of these like hour-long speeches where they would be like 10 minutes and people could talk a little bit, go to the bathroom, come back, and then a next speaker, another hour. And then finally, that was sort of worked in a little bit, a couple times here and there, and lo and behold, people liked that. So then we argued, come on, these speeches got to be shorter. And so finally, they did slowly over a couple of years. They finally started getting them down to like 30-minute speeches, and then we'd have like the 10 minutes of, or in some cases even like 15 minutes of being able to commiserate with our fellows and sisters from around the world and that had attended. And this was a wonderful thing. But the next step, what I really wanted, is just they're absolutely hidebound. They're not going to let it happen. And Jeff and I were talking about that tonight, and that is relevant academic speakers or speaker, entertaining speaker or speaker. So when I say, I guess I might rephrase that, a firebrand or firebrands, or an emotional speaker, so you could have both, something that's more a comic, something like that. So that sort of range of presentation, and then also just like pure entertainment. So a live reading of a poem, or of course a band playing, and so this is the kind of thing that is, but it's not going to look, when it comes together, ladies and gentlemen, just like the actual doctrine here that is going to recapture our destiny if we promulgate it to enough people in time, going free. This looks nothing like what has gone before, and yet this is working for everyone. So, as I said, we'll look back and we'll say, well, of course it had to be that way. It worked, and so everybody should have just seen that was going to be the case. But it's not going to be seen that way initially. We need a psychological defense for the psychological warfare that's being waged against us as a people. Therefore, we have to be a people. This is very complex. We need community. Community needs art, music, poetry, sculpture, painting, etc. And we need mythopoetic writing as well. We have to bring all of that together. And this is going to be what truly frees us from anti-whiteism and these perpetual losses that we continue to suffer by using things like political ideologies, nationalism, patriotism, religions, different varieties of Catholicism and Christianity. We need all of those things to be able to come together under a umbrella that protects us from the type of attack that is being brought against us, which is psychological warfare. We have to address that. If you don't address it, you just are an asshole. I mean, I just no more talking to these people who think that it can be another flag and another stupid political slogan or something like this. You're going to lose. Even if you have a victory in the short term, you're going to lose. Now, these new conferences that I want to hold and that Jeff and I were talking about in depth and getting into some of the nuts and bolts of how to make these things happen, totally going to be totally different from what there'll be elements that will be similar to what you've seen before, certainly. But there is going to be a very for very many people, there's going to be a moment where they say, whoa, what exactly is this? What are they trying to do here? I don't want to have anything to do with that. Or this might not be very interesting. Or this seems so odd to me that it can't be good. But just like this, it's going to prove to be the thing of the future. It's going to be the thing that really unites us, a big part of the great white awakening that we're going to see on planet. And this is right as I say that, I'm going to say this. We say as part of our pristine vocabulary here in Going Free, the great white awakening. We never say great replacement. Nobody in Going Free says great replacement. I'm going to have to do a whole show on Going Free on this idiotic phrase of the great replacement. Never repeat that ever again. If you're going free, that is not pristine language. So we can talk about the great white awakening and these sorts of conferences that Jeff and I are talking about having here in the future. And by future, I mean 2020. The kinds of conferences that we are talking about are going to be a big part of the great white awakening, which is happening now on a global scale for Western kind, a truly magnificent thing. Now, what happened that was quite funny at the beginning of this meal, Jeff and I met up. And of course, we're not going to reveal the part of town that we were in when we met up. But I said, well, here's a restaurant where we never been there before. So let's check this restaurant out. Let's go inside there. So we went inside and it looked quite lovely. Not spectacular, but it certainly was sensuous in there. And we sat down and we picked up the menus. And I said, well, do you want to walk out of here? And he looked at the menu. He said, well, I'm not trying to be stingy or anything, but they came over, they gave us our water. And I said, look, I've walked out of restaurants before. It's no big deal. These are some healthy prices. And we are both not wealthy people. So when the waitress came back, a lovely lady indeed, I said, I have to apologize, dear. We are going to be heading next door or wherever we have to go to find something a bit more affordable for folks on our level. And then she was quite kind. She said, well, yes, I'm sure you guys are looking for someplace more laid back. Yes, laid back as in cheap enough that we can afford it. But, so yeah, we then made our way out of that restaurant to one that was a bit more much more affordable. And I think I saw somebody who asked what we had. We both had salads. And I had shrimp salad, and I think his was maybe chicken salad, and drank water. And as you might imagine, I also had a coffee, and he had water as well. So not big spenders. We save our money for the fight for white well-being. But we got a lot accomplished, and it was some great fellowship, and looking forward to some really exciting things this year.
No big piece of cake at the end?
Oh, no, certainly no. No.
Now, if anyone's watched our health and wellness, that wouldn't make sense.
No, precisely. Let me go ahead and read a fantastic super chat has just shown up on Entropy. Thank you very much. Ohesian Outlaw, a newcomer, at least newcomer to me, maybe have been here for quite a little while, but last was a month or so. And Ohesian or 2 months. Ohesian Outlaw, $50 over on Entropy. Thank you.
Thank you
very much, my dear friend. And writing here, what do you think will be the catalyst that brings people home to white well-being? Will it be a slow process as the anti-whites overstep, or more like an economic collapse that turns people tribal? Well, both and neither. So the answer is extremely complex because humanity is extremely complex, and the future is really full of possibilities. given the number of structures that are disintegrating simultaneously under the weight of anti-white equality, this misnomer, and given the fact that so many of our people are waking up. Really, Ohejan, you're asking a great question about this societal context that we talk about, and how will this really shift, and how will this shift give us opportunities that we don't currently see because they don't exist. And I don't see for the United States, and this could be different elsewhere, because we have every country in the West to consider, but I don't see the anti-white elites permitting some giant economic collapse, because that will disrupt their control over things. They don't need a giant economic collapse to gain control. They have full control. So like in the for many years now, I've heard these old timers talking about endlessly about, oh, they're going to cause this great collapse so that they can really take it. No, they own the printing press. They don't need more. They have all the power. They have all the control. They don't need more control. And there isn't an oppositional force that a collapse would crush. So there's no possibility of that. Now, if they want to do anything, they might take the economy on a slow downward trajectory, controlled descent, so that they can continue to maintain their control and yet bring down the level of potential resistance, just generally speaking. What's most important here that we have to consider is not what maybe a god or gods or some divine entity can objectively say, this exactly is what's happening right now. There's exactly an economic collapse of this significance or level, or whatever it might be. What matters is the perception of our brothers and sisters out there, the vagues that we have to reach. If they continue to perceive, and this would be what the anti-whites would control if we don't get to them with this curative contagion. If they continue to perceive that everything's fine, the country's fine, this massive influx of people with very different biospirits from our own, that's all working beautifully. If they continue to perceive such things, then it won't matter how bad it actually is. Even if they're having troubles at work that they never had before, the company's not able to get work that the company wasn't able to get before, and they know somebody across town who their company's having a little bit of trouble. If they don't realize, and if they are not going free, if they don't realize that there is this agenda to keep them stuck and mired in the anti-white narrative, then they're apt to conclude that they are in some anomalous position with their company or their job or their industry struggling or what have you, and that everywhere else is like the TV shows and movies, everything else is just going along swimmingly. So we need to make sure that we reach them and we let them know what's really going on. This is the thing. 50 years ago, if we had been able to reach our people with going free, inoculating them for the new MPs, treating them for the MPs they have, and educating them as to how bad things actually are and the trajectory of where things are going, they would have been galvanized then. So it's not about how bad things actually are. It's about their perception of how bad or good or indifferent things actually are. That's what's most important. So I really appreciate that question. And let's get Jared George's thoughts on it.
Well, to play devil's advocate, the complete control line, that kind of stuck out at me. I hear a lot of people say that if they did have total control and there weren't countervailing forces, whether behind the scenes or overt, that people doing work like you and I are doing in this whole scene wouldn't be able to be where it is right now. Obviously, we're harangued and harassed and censored, but we're still here, and there's still people who are speaking out or producing material. And if they didn't have anything to hide and they had complete control, then it would be markedly worse than how it is now.
The reason why people like you and I are, Mark Collette, everybody, is able to produce this content is not a factor of a I'll use the word that was used a couple of weeks ago, like let me managed system, like a software program where you have inputs and outputs, and you want X number of whatever is your widgets or whatever it might be coming through this gate, and Y number at this gate, or something of that degree of control. That's not how human dynamism works. That's not how the anti-white elites control society. They control society by way of incentives. They create a system where the brightest people pursuing their self-interests, because they know human nature and that people are going to pursue their self-interests, that these people pursue their self-interests in a way that rewards them and simultaneously rewards the anti-white elite superstructure in which these people are allowed to function. Now, part of the superstructure, its existence, is the illusion that what has come forward from the past is still in effect. And so this holds true in all of these countries where anti-white elites have taken over the printing of the currency of the countries, which is the supreme power. In a universe where people exchange units of currency for the things they need and the things they want, the ability to print that is all of the power in the world. So part of this heritage coming down that they have to work within, because they don't remember this. As I say, this isn't a system where like you can sit down and we're going to write some software, or we're going to create maybe a system for channeling water away from a house or something, and we can just make it from scratch. They have to deal with humanity and governance and belief systems, etc., all taking place the way they are and the way they shift. And they can influence them greatly, obviously, with all of the sums of money that they have. But they can't radically change it without causing a potential opportunity for opponents, maybe other anti-whites who are nearly as powerful, or maybe people who aren't anti-white, to try to usurp the position that they have as this ruling elite, this anti-white elite. Part of this illusion that has been handed down to them, and they have to maintain, because of the power of the white middle class, the intelligence, the accumulated and amassed wealth, all of the abilities, the training, etc., of all of these vagues of hundreds of millions of white people across the West. This continues to be a counterforce that can overcome them quite easily. If these people were galvanized, it would almost be an overnight scenario that the anti-white elites would immediately be unseated. It would just happen quickly. So they have to continue maintaining the illusions handed down from the past, which in the United States and elsewhere are things like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, these sorts of things. And then what they do as best they can is they try to shunt these things with different rules and restrictions. Now, I'm talking about like from a global view. Now, remember, this is controlling the system in which everything's taking place. You don't just have one level of anti-white elites. You have anti-whites throughout that system, all trying to accomplish anti-white objectives in some in smarter ways, some in ignorant ways. Like here, Ralph, the governor in Virginia, saying some very ignorant things that ended up rousing 15,000 or however many came out to this rally in Richmond. It was because of the stupid things that he said. So since these anti-white elites have to deal with this illusion coming down from the past, they have to maintain the appearance that people have freedom of speech. People can disagree. People can do these things. And I think for those anti-white elites at the top, they are coming into this new season now, where this anti-white ideology has produced such fanaticism and so many radicals. So many people have been thoroughly infected with anti-whiteism that they now have to deal with the purity spiral. And this is not something that is easy to put the brakes on, or indeed the brakes can be put on it at all. So it won't necessarily be the anti-white elites at the top who decide, okay, Mr. George can't speak anymore. It's going to be some low-level nothing, some totally inconsequential loser that is going to make the decision that people like us need to be silenced and hanged or whatever it is, because, or like we saw, I just reposted a tweet of yet another Bernie Sanders employee, field organizer, talking about internment camps and just like praising the Soviet Union and saying that government in the United States has to be suspended, need to get Bernie in there so it can be suspended so that his staff can implement such programs to arrest people like us, to take us to these re-education camps. And, you know, the other guy, what they call re-education camp, these gulags, and the other guy saying, well, you know, some of them are not going to be able to re-educated. They're just going to have to get the wall. And by that, of course, they mean murdered by rifles. So we're talking about this ultimate control. They have ultimate control in that they control the printing houses. They are the lenders. They lend from the governance, the seats of government. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, all of this I'm talking about is taking place in World of Warcraft. And you can ask YouTube if any of it is true. It may or may not be true. But you can look at the Federal Reserve. You can look at the government's printing mechanisms in other Western countries, and you can see you have these central bodies. They then disperse the money to other banking institutions, most of which, certainly at the highest levels, are anti-white, irrespective of their race or religion or whatever. They're anti-white. That's what matters to us and our survival. So that they have the ultimate power there. They don't need to crash the system to gain more power. The power has been taken. The ring of Sauron has been, or whatever it is in Lord of the Rings, has been taken. They have that power now. So if they wanted, they could slowly say, if you were to put yourself in their shoes, they might say, well, those who are white positive it's spreading throughout the population. A great many white people now are resistant against the disease we'd like to infect them with. So let's bring down their wealth. Let's bring down their ability to resist. Let's put all of their thoughts on getting the next loaf of bread. They could begin incrementally taking the system down like that. But even if they did that, or not but when they would do that, they would practice the psychological warfare of, and we see this as most people find it very surprising, when in the military, they begin an attack, they broadcast over speakers to the enemy in their language that they're not being attacked, put their weapons down, and just surrender, even while they're being shot. So it is a psychological trick. It causes people to become paralyzed. They don't know what to do. So while they would be incrementally taking down the ability of the average person to resist this power structure, they would be telling them through the movies, television, books, and that everything is okay everywhere. If you're having some sort of problems, then that's your issue. And maybe the people you know, but everywhere else is just fine. So it's a perception issue. If we could have gotten to all of the United States, of all of white America back in 1965, for example, if we could, just for thought experiment, have some kind of omnipotent power, and when they voted on this 65 Immigration Act, that we then spoke to the masses and said, just out of the air around them, God, or out of a burning bush. And I'm not talking about a red-haired woman, but if we just talked to them and we said with absolute omniscient ability and power and believability that, look, this Immigration Act is going to cause X, Y, and Z. The country will be ruined or to be utterly changed. And of course, if anti-whites are listening at YouTube, the country will be made so much better when it becomes a place that is populated by these people coming in from these wonderful countries around the world. And if we could get to them with that, they would then have perceived, okay, this is a really bad thing. Kennedy is saying it's not going to change anything. We're riding high. There's great music. There are great cars, muscle cars. Everything's looking good. So nothing to worry about. If we could have, with that power, convinced them that this was indeed going to be the future of the country, the future of their grandchildren and children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they would have been motivated immediately. There could have been 10 million descend on Washington, D.C. if they could have seen back in 1965 that we would have men dressed in the clothes of women and also in Halloween costume. I mean, what we would honestly call a Halloween costume. When do you really see one of these folks in just they go to read to the children and they look like an actual lady? You know, they've just put on their makeup and a dress or whatever it is they want to put on, and they just look like maybe a very masculine looking lady. They always have things like horns, and it's bizarre what I see. If you could have gotten to them and told them in 1965, look, this is going to be in the schools, this is going to be in the libraries, this is going to be, and then show them these little boys getting injections to prevent them from growing up to be big boys, and then males, if not men, and them dressing in these outfits and then going out and dancing with nude men in the streets and having nude and semi-nude men put money on them. If they could have seen that, they would have been motivated to oppose it. So it comes down to an issue of perception. That's why it is so important to talk about going free, helping people begin to treat their mean pathogens and inoculate them against new ones, because just saying, well, let's just hope something negative that is just huge happens, it's just so awful that people will get motivated to rally around each other and finally become tribal or whatever it might be, that is simply not enough, because there is psychological warfare being waged against us of the likes the world has never seen. And that is why we have to continue on this as rapidly as we can. And I know I'll be doing everything I can. I know Mr. George will be doing everything he can over this year and the next decade, which Jeff and I reaffirmed that Mr. George and I have said here that this is going to be the roaring 20s yet again. It's going to be the decade we recapture our destiny. But that's a great question, Jared.
I'd like to keep on the perception thing for a little bit.
Yeah.
And explore that more if it bears more exploring. Because some of the things, you see little signposts, and they're not always explicitly in the realm of white positivity, but they might be tangential. One quick example, it's not the only one, but one quick example that most people will recognize recently is the Ricky Gervais speech at the Golden Globes. I've heard it said by some people, oh, you kind of see the tides changing a little bit. There's a pushback against all of the globo homo insanity that you were just indicating, Jason. And because people see that tide turning, they think, well, it's a trend and none of this can go on forever. Some people call it a moral panic. There's some YouTubers that talk about cycles and waves of moral panics. I think we have to be really careful and nuanced here, because on two levels. One is some of that stuff is related to attacks on the white population, but some of it dances around it. So if you see pushback by certain people with normal sensibilities about Drag Queen Story Hour or the kind of thing Ricky Gervais said, sure, it's a step in the right direction and we support it, but it might not still be getting to the core of what we talk about and we work on here. And the way I like to frame it, you might have heard me say this before, is sometimes I like to take a step back and ask, and I've mentioned this in some of my own videos, what would you be doing if there wasn't all of this anti-whiteness in the world around you? And I know that hypotheticals are not perfect, but it still opens up your mind a little bit, because to me, it takes us right back to the conversation you and Jeff must have had tonight. And there are people working in the political sphere who want to correct some of the course of the way that our laws and politics and structures are shaped. And that's all well and good. That's not quite what I know about, and I don't like to speak too much on things I don't know too much about. culture, you would still be doing things imbued. If we lived in a healthier world, you could see like a bizarro world where none of this happened. You would still be doing things. You wouldn't be pushing back against anything, but you would still be doing something with a forward thrust that is imbued with your ethnoculture in all of the various ways that you hold your life and have a life with your family and friends and community. So we have to assume the win in a way and act that way now. I like what you said before, Jason, when you were describing the dinner with Jeff around all of that. The other quick thing I'll say is, even if there are overt wins in the more white positive, like specifically white positive, where people have been so used to losing, you can't think that those first couple of baby step wins mean that, oh, all of a sudden everything's great again. You're so used to losing that even a little win, even a little victory, even more people seeming like they're waking up, then you can rest on your laurels. So we have to be very careful about that. The work's only just begun with those few little wins. So having said that, I'm curious if you or people in the chat have ideas about this perception thing, because we've talked about it before, but of course you're phrasing it in a certain way right now. And I think it's a precise and it's a clean way to phrase it. And it's important. I'm glad you said it the way you did.
Well, yeah, folks, it's a really, really complex subject. So if you have any more questions about it, just tag Jared and or myself, and we will cover it a little bit more before we get out of here tonight and get back to work. Got a lot of good things going on. I'm talking with the artist again on the book for Prometheus Rising, and I think we have found something that we'll at least be working on now instead of something.
Yeah, we're talking about that. I mentioned a few things there. What do you think, Jason, about the perception that some of this is just a moral panic, all of the craziness we've seen over the last few years? Drag Queen Story Hour, I guess, is an avatar of it, but we know there's a lot more. That's an easy example. But that's just a moral panic. It's a cycle. It can't go on forever. It's going to be pushed back against. And so it's true, but it's a very tricky thing where you don't want people getting lazy and just thinking that the cycle will kind of take care of itself. It can breed passivity in a way.
Yeah, there's no normalcy to what is happening. This is not some cyclical thing that we always, this is, I think, part of a misunderstanding of this lineage of cyclical being that comes to us from a lot of our deep thinkers and understanding going back antediluvian times in Europe. This history has cycles. History has cycles because we are cyclical beings, and therefore there is no need for a crash. There has been mismanagement in our governance and economy because of this belief, this really childish hope and belief that you could build an unchanging system or changing very little, that could manage our cyclical nature, or failing to notice our cyclical nature, that you could build this permanent system and it would just work perfectly through these cycles. That's not how it works. And this idea that comes down to, from where it's coming from, I haven't looked at where it's coming from, but I am inclined to think that most people are misinterpreting this idea of a civilization being cyclical, in that they conclude that there has to be this absolute degradation, destruction of all things that we hold dear. No, these things take place for reasons. It is not fated in any sort of card. So it's a dangerous thing to conclude that there is this grand cyclical clock and we're just at the terrible hour. But if it keeps ticking, then we're going to come to the good hour. That's not, no. Things have gotten better after they got worse because men of the West decided, oh, we're going to make this better. We're not going to live like this. They were born into this misery, into a system that was not properly constructed to account for the cyclical nature of our beings, of who and what we are. And so as that system that was built for an era of our cycles as people, as that system no longer served, and therefore their society was crumbling, people were born into it and they said, this is really wretched. We're going to have to tear this down because it doesn't work for us in this point in our cycle as beings, and then build something that does work for us. So I think that's where this misunderstanding comes from. And therefore, the danger, as I say, is that this is somehow fated. And therefore, well, these people who are trying to introduce children, and I said this on Going Free, that wouldn't matter to me, what we have at the libraries and what we have going into the children's classrooms, what we have going into these private schools, classrooms and all, with these men that are homosexual men, and they like to dress in the other sex's clothing and normalize sexuality for children. And of course, there are people who live those lifestyles that object to bringing sexuality to children. My position, what I said on Sunday, was if this was a heterosexual guy or heterosexual woman that dressed in the clothes that are normal for their sex and went to children's story hour and tried to sexualize the children, I would want to pull them away from the children as readily as I want to pull away these people who wear Halloween costumes in front of the children and try to introduce this sexuality to them as well. So the danger there is to say, well, if, just like you're saying there, Mr. George, very sagaciously, if people believe that, well, this is just a cycle, the hand of time is going to just turning through this gross period and then it'll right itself again because there'll be some pushback against it, that absolutely engenders this apathy, this belief that somebody else is going to do it for me, somebody else is going to fix this, magic nature will fix it, and then everything will be right again, and I can just continue to worry about sports ball, or I can continue to worry about the television series that the person watches all the time, or whatever it might be. This is not going to get better unless we make it better. And this, as I said about this decade, it's not going to get better as we are getting better, as we are getting stronger. This will continue to get worse. There's not going to be a moment where it says, okay, the hand has ticked to rock bottom and now it's going to start back on the upward cycle. It's just going to continue to plummet. It is a train that is out of control and it is on fire. It is headed for the cliff. It is a disaster that is coming. But we are running on a parallel track. We are going to get stronger and stronger. And on our track, as long as we continue to build this service to white well-being, helping people to go free, that bridge from this horrible place where we are today to that nirvana that we want to be, we'll cross that chasm. And as their train goes over the cliff, ours will smoothly sail across the chasm onto the bliss that we have made for ourselves. We can do this. Everyone here has been touched. And Jeff mentioned this tonight, and we were talking about this, that he says, well, we're a small community and we need to be growing. We need to be expanding. We are, relative to some of these other communities of really useless people. I would give me one good man or good woman for 50 of the useless people that watch some of these other content producers, read some of these other content producers. What good are those folks? Look at the heroes we have here and the kind of things that they get up and they get out and they make things happen. So I mentioned, or I wanted to mention to Jeff, we ran out of time, but what I continue to say here is that we are the apostles. We are here first because something wanted us here first. It can be God or gods or chance or fate or whatever you want to call it. Something wanted us here first. Something has chosen you to play a part in this story. And it's like, Jared, I said on Sunday, I said, isn't it magnificent that we get to live in the era, literally in the pages of the history books that our distant descendants will read about the grand victory for our people? We get to live in those pages. So
it's thrilling. It's thrilling. You should be inspired by it.
Yes, precisely. We need to live our lives with the recognition that we have been selected. We are the apostles. We are going to bring this to the millions of our people, this going free, this service to white well-being, and with the knowledge, with every one of our acts, that we are on those pages, that those descendants in eras to come, whose eyes will wander over those words, that will be us in those pages. Now, it might be that it's one of our names or a cause that we were a part of, or a day or an event, or the big this or the big that, or it might be that era that they're reading about in their history books, and then they think, well, that's why I have great-great-grandmother's name. That's why I have her first name. A little girl could be saying that. That's why I have her first name, because she is in those pages. She was there doing those things. That's why her name comes down and we remember her today. So yeah, this is the time to be active, to be focused, and to be getting things done, rather than this misinterpretation. And I know we all have seen it, that, well, this is just a grand cycle. There's nothing you can do. And if this is the first time that you're hearing, ladies and gentlemen, my perception of this cyclical argument, that our civilizations are cyclical because we are cyclical, and the civilizations have crashed because our institutions have not been cyclical. We've created these static institutions that could not easily change with our cycling existence. If we remedy this, and this is the big challenge, and once we recapture our destiny, because right now what we got to worry about is that destiny. We need to have our hands back around it. It's going to take many different forms. Don't ever let an anti-white say to you, well, what does it mean to recapture your destiny? And then they will fill in the blank of all the atrocities that it will entail. Recapturing our destiny takes many forms, from small to large. It can be, recapturing our destiny can be something as seemingly insignificant but magnificent as controlling what your children see and consume as entertainment. That's a enormous recapturing of our destiny. To a town, a little town somewhere, and the entire board that gets elected are all white positive people, and they begin instituting white positive acts and laws, and repealing anti-white acts and laws, and etc. That is a recapturing of our destiny. So there are an infinite number of definitions of the recapture of our destiny. It's a very important thing to appreciate, and I don't think I've said it enough, because the anti-whites will want to define it as something ugly and violent and objectionable to everyone. You do not let them do that. We get to decide what it means, but you get to play a part in the recapture of that destiny. And once we have it recaptured, then we can look to the great challenge of that age, which will be to create economies and governmental structures and the like that have the flexibility to cycle with a cyclical being.
I'm still thinking about the burning bush comment.
Some things come to my mind during these after hours, and they just come out maybe when they shouldn't.
Well, that's why it's after hours. Send us out the after party.
Right, exactly. I think we have some super chats. Let me read those really quick, and then we'll get over to you, Mr. George. Mrs. Jess Horst jumping in with a super chat of $19.99. Hats off to you, a grand participant in the cause for white well-being. Great servant to white well-being. We will have over on, let's see, this is on Ko-fi. White Healing just super chatted $42. Thank you so much for that kind super chat. Didn't write anything, but it's a magnificent name. Another great participant, $42 on Ko-fi. Let me make sure if
thank you.
Yes, Cash App is 0, and let me make sure the other Ko-fi is what it is, and we'll take a quick look at Entropy as well while that is coming together. And we do indeed have Kabuki over here on Entropy, super chatting $5. Thank you so much. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you do jump over on Entropy, you can pose questions in the question widget and vote on questions there. Every one of my teachers were anti-white. I have no respect for any of those Bolsheviks. Well, yeah, you can, and you actually use that right, Kabuki. important thing, the definitive thing, is that they're anti-white. If you want to tack on something like, well, they're Bolsheviks or something like this, you can confuse your audience. It's best just to keep it that they're anti-white, because this is a storyline for us. It's a reality for us that you have those of us who are serving white well-being, those of us out there in the world that are ultimately neutral. They're sort of non-grayish entities moving through space for us, and those who make of themselves anti-whites in their deeds, in their actions, in their thought processes, in the ideologies they endorse and what they put their money to. And we simply acknowledge their decision to be anti-white. So when we get into this, calling them by these other names of their taking, or even names that mock them, like commie or something like this, you really undermine our story, because that's the anti-white narrative. That's their story. But at least you said anti-white, so I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right in your sentiment that I have no doubt that they were all anti-white, and very good on you to not have any respect for any one of those bastards. And think of all of the minds that they are poisoning. Shouldn't every single one of these people be brought up on charges? I mean, if there is child abuse for beating, if there's child abuse for run-of-the-mill psychological trauma like verbal abuse and this sort of thing, then surely it is child abuse when you are teaching an entire group of people that they are, by way of an intrinsic, indelible essence of their being, connected to pure and unadulterated evil. That is absolutely unforgivable. And these people, I think they should absolutely be brought up on charges. And that is it for our super chats for right now, Jared.
My heating just came on. If you hear something in the background, related, I'll give this out too, because you're on a good roll. So I'll serve as kind of the interviewer, as if it's a tap with Jason as our guest. Okay. So the rally in Richmond went well. It was without incident. Some interesting things about that, though, and one angle would be that some people say the strategy going forward should be to focus on rights first, because the identity is intrinsic, but that comes later, and that it's an easier sell to do the whole rights thing. In this case, of course, gun rights. Something like Charlottesville was more overtly about white identity and heritage, and thus it was attacked. Things were different then as well. Both the government and people broadly from our spheres, even though it's a wide tent, have learned and adjusted a lot since then. So we have to keep that in mind as well. The flip side of that, though, is the reason you were able to get, 25,000 people out there, is because it was, again, for something about rights, and that you couldn't get 25,000 people out there for something that was more overt, where they would be scared to be seen if it was something, say, overtly against demographic change. We're going to go to Texas and we're going to say this is ridiculous, or go to major cities and say this has to stop. It does mean something to be white in America, and we're being demographically replaced. That couldn't happen. Now, I'm not taking anything away from all the people that went and how good it was, and we're all very happy that no one got hurt. It was without incident. Everyone's happy about that. I don't want to be misunderstood. But going forward, and in the spirit of the lessons that we're trying to parse through with some of the things we've been talking about tonight, I have seen both of those angles, but it begs a question. It begs a question about organizing around rights versus overt identity.
I would say to this, well, first, let me just say, Greek American wrote here, me and my mom passed a church that is clearly anti-white with a sign that said, quote, "What will you do with your white privilege in 2020? My opinion on that is that it's absolutely despicable. You properly identified it as anti-white, and the thing you could and should do is block your phone number, call that church, and ask them, why the hell they are so anti-white. Is that in God's plan? Is that what Jesus wanted, to inflict injury on white people and then hang up on them? Let them know. Don't give them an opportunity to say, no, no, no. What we mean is, no, don't let them live by the anti-white narrative. You let them know your opinion and then you hang up on them. Do not give them the opportunity to speak back. Let them know that people in the community think they are repulsive. You want them to have the feeling that if they received that one phone call, and this is indeed likely to be the case, and increasingly so as white people continue to come to the awareness and willing to speak about, even in ways that is considered heretical, the injury that is being inflicted on us. The fact that they receive one phone call, and maybe you wouldn't be the one phone call, maybe they'll receive 5 phone calls, they will have the impression that there must be 5,000 out there that have driven by our church and are disgusted by this anti-white position. Let them know how sickened you are by how anti-white they are. Don't curse them. Don't threaten them. You can say in an absolutely stern voice, and you can, if it's a woman, you can say, "Dear madam." If it's a man, "Dear sir." And then you just let them know that they are despicable anti-whites, because you cannot inflict injury on people who have never done anything to inflict injury on others. There is no atonement for a grievance never committed. So you could even have that right out of my book available, the 9 words, and say that to them and then hang up on them. Don't allow them to talk back. That's how I would handle it. Do that, folks. You could do that with every business out there. Let them know. We have people doing that on both a positive side, where if they see something positive, then they at a business, maybe it's a white couple together on a big poster in the window of the store, and they write a letter, they pick up the phone and they say, "Hey, you know what? Thank you for not having another white erasure poster. They actually have a white couple together instead of promoting the biological white erasure of Western kind. Thank you, goodbye," and then hang up the phone. No need to have to put them on the spot and make them say, "No, no, no, actually we don't import." No, just don't even do it. Leave the message with them. Start in the United States. It's very easy to make a phone call to block your number. And if this doesn't work for someone, let me know ahead of time. Of course, you can always call from a payphone to do this if you're very afraid. But just by dialing *67, you block your number. And in most cases, of course, don't be calling things like police departments. They can see anything. But you're not going to be threatening. You're not going to be angry. You're just going to give your opinion with respect and then hang up on them, because they don't deserve any more than that from you. So let them know that the community knows, and the community is disgusted. Now, when it comes, we're talking about this idea about rights, and should we get together on this implicit whiteness rather than explicit, this implicit loyalty to our people and our biosphere and what we create, rather than an explicit loyalty to and defense of our well-being. That has been and will continue to be an extremely tempting and meretricious option. Meretricious means that it looks good looks great on the outside, but on the inside, it's devoid of any value whatsoever. It is garbage. Our people, and this is one of the defining traits of a conservative, is that they think, well, let's talk about these things that are less heretical, and we'll be able to draw more people. The problem is that if you're not talking explicitly about white well-being, it will automatically serve the anti-white narrative. It will automatically, it ipso facto must go this direction, because it's still living within the anti-white narrative. If it still lives and breathes within the anti-white narrative, then it can't get off of that road. It can't get off of those pages and onto the pages of a different book. You can't get people to come out for, say, Second Amendment and then say to them, by the way, this is actually white positive, or trick them into going a direction that is white positive by way of our rights or something. Very bright people, wealthy people have tried to do this. We see the conservatives. This is, as I say, it's a defining factor of conservatism, is this, let's just try. When I was in the Nerve Center for the Conservative Movement on the Hill, was really what they were all about. we know it's us, but let's just talk about these things that we care about. But you can take every single one of those things, you can take every single one of those rights, and they can be interpreted inside of the anti-white narrative to be something that is exists irrespective of white people, and applies to all peoples, and applies throughout all time, and is applied throughout all time prior to us being alive now, in that it is these intrinsic things that are finally recognized, and the real victims, and this is how it always ends up being talked about in conservative circles, the real victims of the erosion of the Second Amendment are going to be the non-white people, because those are the people who are living in the bad neighborhoods. Those are the people who are living in the worst neighborhoods. And they are not going to be able to legally obtain firearms to defend their families. And so, God, why can't we just save the non-white people? And then that's it. It's over. This happens again and again and again. This is why we cannot create a movement for white well-being that is not explicitly in the service of white well-being. Now, we will be able to, as it, when all of these people went out to this rally, I saw the video, I saw photographs, it wasn't lost on these people that it was nearly 100% white. So a great many of those people are going to be willing to join us in service to white well-being, especially as the years march forward and more of these rights are taken away. Let me just give one thing and then I'll pass it back, and we'll see. I thought I saw maybe another super chat, but just a thought experiment. If we develop the organizational entity, as I plan and will do, it's up and running and it's powerful. What do you think is going to happen to all of these white people who were too afraid to come out for something explicitly white, but were willing to speak out because it wasn't quite as heretical for the First Amendment, or were willing to speak out for the right of association, or were willing to speak out for the right of self-defense? They will all see the preservation of what they care about in that organizational entity, and they will move in right behind it and give it their support. Many of them will do it as quietly as they can, as they dip their toe in the water. And how heretical is it now? Am I still going to be considered a moral person? And a lot of people will slowly come this way, very tepidly into the waters, the tepid waters. And some of them will take the plunge and say, yes, I realize, openly will state that my right to self-defense is only going to be preserved through this organizational entity that is going to explicitly serve white well-being. They will all come in behind us, because why? If they care about freedom of speech, if they care about the right to self-defense, any of these other rights that are so precious to them, they'll realize that in all of these endeavors, all they have done for the past almost 100 years is lose. Everything has been eroding. Everything has been more taken away, because when you're conserving, all you can do is lose. When you conserve a manuscript, all you can do is slow down the erosion. Eventually, time will wipe it out. We are making something new. We are building something brand new, stronger, more robust, and resilient. It has an immune system for this anti-whiteism. All of these folks, they will fall in line, I promise.
I was taking a look at the chat. But folks, get your questions in, because we're really not going to be
here.
We
only got a little bit longer.
Gun rally was touted as being for a white supremacist rally. As soon as it was over and it was peaceful, it was not. It was not. They didn't even use that term anymore in the media reporting, from what I understand. It was very tame after the rally.
Right.
I do hope you're right about that, because I do fear that some of these people feel that it is safer to go out and talk about their right to self-defense. It's part of their culture. They're not used to being as overt about white heritage, white identity, and there's different kinds of social pressures surrounding that, as we all well know, as we were speaking about a little bit earlier. All of this anti-whiteness has marched on, despite the fact that people in America still have their guns. So there's other lines of defense that have to come first. And again, one big thing is the cultural angle and people coming together for their own culture as people, not as an abstract, but as a lived experience. Again, I'm relating it all because it does relate. It's not a shoehorn to what you started with tonight, talking with Jeff, relaying your conversation with him and plans and kinds of things we're doing, all the natural trajectory from what we've been doing online and expanding into more kinds of projects. Well, that's what, the people in this know that, but the older people who are the kind of gun rights guys that went to that rally, I hope so. I think you're right. I mean, some of them at least will come over because one follows the other. But it is still a bit of a different animal to some of these people.
Oh, without question. And there will be many of them who, and this is harkening back to what we were talking about a little earlier, is a perception issue. Mm-hmm. And the guy who goes out to the gun rally, but what he should be calling, if he had us, if he were relying on us rather than these ignorant organizations that are not expressly and explicitly white positive, he would be calling it a self-defense rally. But for folks like that, his perception is that things aren't that bad. It's just this simple threat on the Second Amendment at the moment, and we just have to show up, and then that'll back it off, and we'll be back to perfect America. And as a consequence, he doesn't want to challenge. He definitely doesn't walk into heretical waters and challenge the system's anti-white stance. He is, and if he does perceive it, he's a coward. And certainly we don't need cowards. But there are going to be far more people who end up, and folks, just because a person gets decked out in fatigues and straps a gun across their chest with high-powered scope and everything else, that doesn't mean they're brave. That doesn't mean at all. And it doesn't mean that they will do the right thing in the right moment at all. So you have just as many cowards there as you have anywhere else. But yeah, it comes down to a perception issue with a lot of these folks. And it's becoming the situation is, the societal context is becoming a situation where it's getting increasingly difficult for the anti-white elites, the anti-whites in media and academia and the like, to conceal what the real objective of anti-whiteism is. It's becoming increasingly difficult for them to conceal that everything is copacetic in the world, and if your world is going down in flames, well, you're an anomaly to it, because people are communicating. And they anti-whites at these different platforms that shut us down and censor us off the platforms again and again, folks like us. What they have not found an answer to yet is just the simple peer-to-peer communication, people talking from one platform to the next. And they are observing that conversation. That's why they're panicking, because they see so many white people are realizing, well, the same thing that my life, my neighborhood, my county is not an anomaly. It's not an aberration. This is taking place all across the West, and it is targeting my people, the people I belong to. And as a consequence, more and more of these folks are going to be showing up. And I think that it would behoove us, and this is something I've talked about before, when passing out leaflets. And by the way, a lot of you folks who wrote me asking for leaflets, they are going to be in the mail tomorrow, so they're going to be on the way. A big salute to all of you for your service to White Wellbeing. But it behooves us when passing out leaflets, for example, right now, if we had the wherewithal at this rally like this in Richmond, we would have been down there distributing several thousand leaflets right to people's hands. And the main subject on the top of that leaflet is going to be something that speaks directly to the right to self-defense, and maybe something, pithy that would say, stop calling it gun rights, dummy. It's the right to self-defense. And a person looking at that is going to think, oh my God, well, it actually is. And then they'll have cause to look to what comes next. And our rights, for example, the leaflet could say something like, this right to self-defense exists and is preserved by the founding stock of this nation. Western kind is under attack. And you just go through a simple logical process of A to B to C to D. Therefore, you have to get involved in service for white well-being. Mm-hmm. So they would see the cause that they hold dear, their homes, so many of their homes. It's kind of like when you talk about these folks that refer to themselves as gun rights activists, stupidly, or gun collectors or whatever. Most of them, ladies and gentlemen, it's kind of like people who collect paintings, and how outraged they would be if they had to give up all of their expensive paintings. There's an element of that, a significant element. This is their hobby. This is what they enjoy. This is their pastime. This is where they put tons of money. They don't want their hobby, what they enjoy, their pastime, where they put lots of money, yanked out from underneath of them. Yes, there is the right to self-defense, but many of them, they can't even really articulate that.
That's what I was getting at before with this being a cul-de-sac.
Right.
And maybe the rally wasn't attacked, and maybe the Antifa was called off. Because, guys, look, if the government wanted to make waves there, or some actor, because we don't know, of course, here, some agent of the government or otherwise wanted to make waves there and create violence, they would have. It's not just luck that it didn't happen. Antifa wasn't there. Someone was called off. Or maybe they just knew. And I would think that's because it's not as, frankly, it's not as harmful. It's not as threatening to the regime as some of us thought it would be. I'm curious too, and maybe more reports will come out over the next few days. Maybe more videos will come out of people on the street, but that's just still a one-off. I'd love to know if there's an omnipotent force, how many conversations were had that day about Virginia's, because it's in the state of Virginia's demographic changes and the subsequent policy changes and the subsequent changes in the politicians in their state government and the representatives they send to the federal government. How many conversations were had about that day? I hope a lot. I'd like to get some information on that.
I'd like that too. That would be very interesting. And I feel confident that there were quite a few conversations like that took place.
Good.
No, I think that when it comes
to Virginia,
sorry?
You can speak as a Virginian, so I hope. Yeah, you're right. It was odd to me that it was I don't know who organized it. I don't know if you know, or we can find out quickly, or people in the audience know. Why Martin Luther King Day was chosen? Because you could see the headlines being written already. Anything untoward that happened that day, it would have been contrasted against the backdrop of the saint, as Jason describes in his book, statue of Martin Luther King in your school courtyard as you were a young man, right? The rights itself, all of this white violence, and then it's on this sacred day, Martin Luther King Day. He stood for the opposite. He was a force of good. It's all right there. It's all right there. So I'm overjoyed that nothing happened. It seemed like such a setup with it being on Martin Luther King Day. I was like, if there weren't nefarious forces behind this, I was thinking to myself, you choose any other day, choose any other weekend day. People are around on a Saturday. People are around on a Sunday. You don't have to do it on a Monday bank holiday. Like the UK, Canada, we only have a few of those a year here. So that seemed like a small miracle too. Maybe there was something they wanted to do and then it was called back. In that crowd with that many people, if they wanted to set something off, if they wanted to do a setup, they would have.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, and yeah, folks, if you have any final questions or super chats, get them in now because we're going to be wrapping up here in a minute. Got a lot of other work to do. But when it comes to them the anti-white elites interfering, the anti-white zealots and the government interfering in the way that they did at Charlottesville, the big difference was, of course, between Charlottesville and Richmond was several big differences. The size of the crowd was much larger in Richmond, which would have been much more difficult to spoil than Charlottesville was. They could easily cordon this area and then sweep through the area. They could allow the anti-white devils to get right up on the folks who wanted to come out there to the rally to support, to oppose white erasure, to support the statue of Robert E. Lee, and that it prevent it from being taken down. And the big fact was that the participants were, except for those in that immediate cordoned off area, which was all chain linked off, they were all armed to the teeth and locked and loaded. So anti-whites, as sick and demented as they are, it would have taken, like in the balaclava wearing types, they don't want to die. They don't want to go out and engage a bunch of people, every one of whom is armed and knows how to shoot, and try to throw bricks and piss and everything else at them, and then potentially have one of these people open up on them and mow them down, threat being intimidated by a mob or anything like this. Now, the anti-whites at higher levels, of course, they might relish this. They might say this is wonderful. But I think we can see here that potentially, as we dismantle this in the days to come and unpack it and examine what exactly took place in Richmond, and thank God nobody was injured, I think part of the unpacking process is going to reveal that this was a representation of a force within this body politic that the anti-whites realize now we are putting our finger on the real wound of the giant, and he's going to wake up. He's going to go berserk. Now, they don't have to fear necessarily that it's going to be a rebellion that is going to bring to fruition some sort of white positive government, but it's merely a rebellion that unseats them. That would be something that they wouldn't want either. So it's yet to be seen exactly how this will affect the government and affect Ralph here in Virginia. Maybe the idea here is let them come out, let them throw a tantrum, and then we're still just going to do what we want to do. There's nothing they can do about it. So this was just a giant waste of their time. We'll see. Now, the organization was a guns Second Amendment. What do they call themselves? I have it over here somewhere, and I will get this process started, and we'll see exactly the name of the organization that was behind it. But then, of course, a number of organizations participated and got on board with this one organization. My guess is that for MLK Day was chosen because the Virginia Citizens Defense League is what it's called. My guess is that MLK Day was chosen because there are stupid people who operate this organization. And not that they contacted the Virginian government and said, when can we get a permit? And then the Virginia government, anti-white, said, only on this day, make sure you come on this day because we've got something planned for you. I know they wouldn't tell us if we asked. In fact, I called these people with some questions. They never got back to me. So I know they wouldn't tell us if we asked. What I think is that there was probably, a bunch of, how can we like just vagues, a bunch of vagues there. Yeah. That we're sitting around and thinking, well, what days can we do this on? What days will people be able to participate? Well, they probably thought, well, Saturday is a possibility, but then maybe Saturday they've just gotten off work the day before. They won't necessarily be ready to roll. Maybe they couldn't necessarily get all the buses. And then they're thinking Sunday, well, maybe a bunch of them won't come on Sundays because they have church and they'll still just go to church. We'll end up sacrificing. Well, guess what? Monday is a holiday. I consider it a holiday,
and it's only a month out in February.
a month out. Well, they want to act because Ralph has said that the Democrats just came to the reins of power January 1st, if that's what it was. And
Right.
so I guess they want to act as quickly as they could. And they thought, well, we have this day off. And then just like a typical vague, no thinking for how this predominantly non-white and less than peaceable population in Richmond might behave in seeing all of these folks swarming into the city. But
yeah, I wonder what that was like. I know Ethan Ralph got mugged when he went to Richmond to cover this. He tweeted out about that.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's I can imagine that the pickpockets were out in force, and the everything, muggers, all kinds of thieves of various stripes. They're probably out there, hucksters, people trying to bilk people out of their dollars. Probably, I saw, after on September 11, I saw an individual, and you all can speculate about what his race was. And right after September 11th, for several weeks, standing on a street corner selling little American flags, but he was really selling crack cocaine. So these people, that's how he was passing on the drugs. It was unbelievable, but they could get away with it. Now, what I assume happened was all of the gangbangers and all of this sort of wonderful people who live down there, they probably thought that since these folks are going to end up being armed, because when I first heard about the state of emergency, I didn't know that it was only applied to this little area. These folks in the projects and everything in Richmond, they wouldn't have heard anything about a state of emergency, and they would have been envisioning thousands of white people with fully automatic weapons, and they're less likely to come out to try to do a drive-by, which is not to say that it wouldn't happen, but surely they would conclude that their vehicles would probably get filled with bullets in return. They'd probably die of lead poisoning before blood loss. But fortunately, we didn't end up with any deaths or any maimings or anything of this nature. And if the city had, this also might speak to, as we unpack this in the days to come, might speak to the real reliance of the anti-whites on the white law enforcement carrying out their anti-white edicts. Remember, I said that if we create a situation in the future where the highest morality is what is good for Western kind is good, what is bad for Western kind is bad, then the banker, the governor, the mayor, the judge, whatever, any of these people who would try to do something that would be detrimental to our people, rather than just to a set of laws or what have you, they would have to face the ire of everyone around them. And that's very different than worrying about maybe a population 1,000,000 times larger than the population you have in your government building, because those people that are 1,000,000 times larger, they're not getting at you. It's not the secretary who's going to be thinking this monster is harming our people, which is going to harm the white children, our white children, etc. So it may be that when they are looking out and they're seeing all of these white law enforcement of all stripes across Virginia saying, no, we're not going to enforce this, that they had to fear that if they give an order to try to carry out, or they try to manipulate some sort of atrocity or similar spectacle to what they did in Charlottesville, that they would have just a rebellion. They would have law enforcement say, no, we're not doing it. We're going to get shot. We're going to die. It's not going to be for some. Now, folks, rest assured, these law enforcement officers, I mean, there's a lot of praise for these guys, and maybe for some of them it's true that they're saying, well, by golly, I read the Constitution and the Virginia State Constitution, and you just can't do this, and I'm going to abide by it. How much you want to bet most of those guys have broken laws in order to abide by the will of those in power already? The reason why they're saying now, these sheriffs, all of these cops, the reason why they're saying, nope, not going to do this, is because just like Antifa or anyone else, they don't want to be dead. And trying to take the right of self-defense away from people is a quick way to be dead. So they fear this. Law enforcement has been talking about it. They don't have any fear of being dead from people coming out to say, don't take this statue down. We don't want to see any more of our statues taken down. But they
Right,
do have a real fear of, what's that?
What would have happened if someone shot an officer there?
Well, that
would be a mess.
Well, there's a big range of possibilities of how anti-whites again at numerous levels. This is why the subject matter is so immensely complex, because it is not like a simple human brain and then this drop down tree of control and operations. You can have anti-whites at any level. You can have anti-whites in foreign governments decide, we don't like the way that America is going. And they look at a future situation like we had here in Virginia with these folks showing up at the rally and say, well, we're going to put somebody over on the grassy knoll, and he is going to, with a weapon that is perhaps the kind of thing that governments can possess, but other people can't. High velocity firearm, maybe somehow is able to, maybe it doesn't even shoot a basic projectile as we understand them with bullets, but something quite different. Maybe there are weapons out there, ladies and gentlemen, that you really have a hard time fathoming that governments possess. A beam of light, anything, and assassinate an officer or something like that, and then have some patsies to blame. Now, that would be something that Ralph and the anti-whites in the government buildings of Virginia wouldn't be behind. It could be, as I say, a completely different foreign actor. And what would Ralph and the other anti-whites face in that scenario? Well, it'd be quite a battle, because you would have police officers who would say, see, I'm not going to be the next one who ends up dead like that guy. And the anti-white media would come in, the regime media would come in, and they would try to say, this is the anti-white narrative. We're going to mold this story to fit what the anti-white narrative says about those who care about the right to self-defense, says about Western kind in general. It would be a giant, traumatic contest. And unless we have an organizational entity like we're talking about here, unless we have some way to communicate this to our people, to communicate the intelligent approach, the intelligent way to share and discuss the topic with friends, family, and strangers, maybe even investigative, the ability to fund an investigative suit whose purpose would be to not win, because we're not going to win in the courts, these anti-white courts, but merely to bring attention, to be able to get to a lot of these vagues, to say, well, in the autopsy, they immediately cremated the body, and one of the people, or 10 of the people who saw the body, noticed that it was a perfectly cylindrical hole that went through the body. There wasn't the expansion that you see from the vacuum of a projectile going through the person, or something of this nature. Whatever it might be, that would bring attention to what happened. And the anti-whites, of course, would be doing everything they could to shut down the conspiracy theories, but they would still then be spread by everybody, because it would be something that they would consider of extreme importance for their individual lives. So yeah, we're getting into those waters where there are a lot of actors, and we're going to need a ship, a vehicle to steer us through this, because if we don't, then we're going to have what we continue to have, which is this flailing in the water, these content producers showing up, and then whether they're getting paid contacted by agents of a government or governments and paid outright to say X, Y, or Z, or whether or not they are manipulated into and created out of a population of content producers to say X, Y, and Z by permitting them to continue to talk, and then others silencing. That's the ultimate form of control, the 200 form of control, IQ form of control that we talked about earlier, with how the anti-white elites run a society to benefit themselves by way of individuals benefiting themselves. So it definitely is something that we need an organizational entity. We need a voice of reason in some very unreasonable times. And so, yeah, these things anything can happen. But I think it would behoove us and will be interesting to investigate the unpacking of what took place there and bounce around different theories in the conversations to come. Let me read some of these super chats. We have Dale Jones at $2, and we had quite a few actually. I don't know if this is gonna. Let me see. Name super chatting $5 from Australia, all the way around the world. Hello to you. A good morning to you. They never had to trick everyone all of the time. They just had to trick enough people for a long enough time for the project to be effective. Very well written, and thank you for those 5 hopping Australian dollars. Victor from Canada, $5 as well. Thank you so much. White Positive Message and nwg.org will be appearing all over my city in the form of sticker labels. I love white families. Keep it positive, family. I love it, Victor. Magnificent. Thank you so much. Make sure when you actually find these stickers, when you're lucky enough to come across one that's posted somewhere, that you get a photograph of it so that we can see these other people that are putting up stickers in your community. And a big salute to you for finding those plastered all over your city. Magnificent. I look forward to seeing that. We're hearing, in fact, there's another article that the magnificent Samantha Fox, she found another article about Born Guilty, and we'll be talking about that, I don't know, sometime soon. And I have to get through it. It's a protracted article, but things are happening already. 2020 is very young, and things are already big things happening. And Victor's going to be one of the great players who's going to be helping us to make it happen. God bless you. I saw Mrs. Jess Horst earlier. Then we have Tall Kevin super chatting $2 and writing here, Jason, don't worry about that burning bush. Too hot. Thanks so much, Tall Kevin. Great to see you again, brother. It's been a little while since I've seen you comment.
He was talking about something else.
Okay. Mrs. Jess Horst super chatting $9.99 again. Thank you, dear lady. It's Ooga Booga's birthday. That's Mr. Booga to all of us today. Happy birthday, Mr. Booga. Also, and we miss you, Heidi and Ray. I love our community. Yes, we do miss Heidi and Ray. And a big happy birthday to Mr. Booga.
Happy birthday, Ooga Booga.
Yes. I hope whatever you want to jump out of your cake jumps out.
Oh, it must be hard to sing happy birthday to him. Happy birthday, Ooga Booga. I guess you could fit it into the happy birthday song.
Yeah, we're talented. We mentioned Dale Jones. Thank you very much. Matt D154 super chatting $9.99 here on YouTube. Thank you so much. What is that the grill of? What kind of car is that? That's not a Triumph. Writing here, keep up the good work, gents. Thanks so much, Matt. Great seeing you. And thank you for the super chat. And now I've got to look over here because we have a super chat from Hi Spurgamy, and I don't see any verbiage, but there might be verbiage because when that shows up on this other screen, and it's on the bottom, it won't show the verbiage. Here we go. And Tifa is very afraid. Sorry?
Yeah, you found it. I was just saying I saw a text in his super chat from earlier.
Yes. Antifa is very afraid of driving the Normicon Second Amendment types to the white positive sphere. I've been following them on social media. Is that right? Well, thank you for that intel. So they're talking amongst themselves. And the last thing they want are all of these Second Amendment right to self-defense folks coming our way. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to make sure that they come our way, especially when we are having these conferences the way I would like to have them. We're going to make sure that we are appealing to all the different factions of our community so that they realize in a very simple way, as I said, A to B to C. Therefore, you have to serve white well-being if you want to keep whatever A was. We'll make sure that more and more of them come our way. And yeah, that's great intel. Thank you so much for sharing that. AK writing here, do you guys like the band Heilung? If so, they're playing just outside DC tomorrow night. I don't know them. Jared George, have you
No, I already replied in the chat.
All right. Let's see what else we have here. I don't see any super chats over on the familiar alternative. No, we're good there. And let's make sure we are good these other platforms, and then we'll check entropy, and we'll get some.
It's like playing whack-a-mole now. I'm checking all of these super chat platforms.
Well, yeah, with this, this is something the anti-whites have done to themselves by making opposition to them so immensely complicated. They have ensured that the brightest and most dedicated would be their opponents. If they had just kept it dumb, they would have had dumb opponents. But the anti-whites aren't very smart. So Zero Talon over here on Cash App, super chatting $5. Thank you very much, dear friend. I'm glad nothing the anti-whites wanted happened. We sure are too. Thank you very much. In fact, we had on Sunday a brief moment of silence in the prayer and hope that nothing horrible would happen to any of those people, that everybody would come home, nobody would end up in the hospital or a casket during this protest. And thank God none of them did. Over here on entropy, we have some questions from Tall Kevin as well over here. And over here on entropy, we have Ohesian Outlaw writing with $5. Thank you very much for another $5, brother. And writing, a popular YT gun channel was criticizing the people of Virginia for not showing up to vote. I posted that you can't fix the problem if you don't address the demographic change, and they blocked me. What a bunch of cowardly pricks. This is what we've talked about for quite a little while, that the conservative movement, they're gatekeepers, and they have a very strong beak on the front of them. They can smell anyone who is talking about reality from miles away. So as soon as somebody shows up who wants to talk about reality, bam, they want to they fire you. They get rid of you. They censor you. They're quicker, or rather, in case you can't be quicker, but they respond with as much alacrity and celerity as the anti-whites. They are just on you the moment you say anything that is white positive, and they want to make sure that gate stays closed. But my friend, make a different account. Show up again. This time with something that will wake some of them up, but won't necessarily get the attention of the mods, or head on over to another a different group. Yeah, the reality is we're not able to outvote them anymore, and democracy is merely a head count. It doesn't matter, therefore, that this person who runs this particular gun channel or whatever it is might have the basest of non-white friends, and they might actually be the kind of people who would support white well-being. The problem is that there are just far, far too few of them in a democracy for it to matter one iota. Tall Kevin writes in the question widget, anyone here feel Hollywood Hogan should have had more title runs in WCW? Not quite sure.
Sure.
Is that Hulk Hogan?
That's when he turned into a bad guy.
Oh, I see. He also writes here, it's late night. Let's have some fun. Let's not make every stream an airing of grievances. Jared and Jason, tell us something about your sense of humor. Jared, that's for you. And then we are going to be signing out.
Tall Kevin. All these shows are a little different, and they take on a different tenor. We had a lot of laughs last week with the walrus mascot. You can't command someone to be funny. That's when the worst stuff happens. But I've seen your name, and we appreciate you being around, Tall Kevin. I know you've been around, so I'm sure you've seen. We definitely like to have fun and be lighthearted as well. We run the gamut here. It's just the way that this show went tonight. It didn't have as many lighthearted moments, but stick with us in the long run, and it'll all even out. It'll all be ironed out. Well, we appreciate the sentiment. I agree with you. And that's why we talk about culture, and that's why we're doing things to create culture. It has to be very multifaceted. We're fully dimensional human beings, and we have to live, experience, and share things together as such. Not the funniest answer, I know, but again, you can't be funny on command. Come on, everybody knows that.
Well, it would have been shocking if you had given that answer while very slowly disrobing. that would have definitely gotten everybody's attention. Hey,
I don't think it's funny.
It would have been. No, me saying that was funny.
They would have listened. Yeah, you saying that was funny. So there, we checked it off. We checked off something funny.
Indeed. Now this symbol is going to become the new hate symbol for the the new hate symbol for the anti-whites. Johnny donated $3 over here on the Familiar Alternative. Jared and NWG, who is your pick for the Super Bowl, which is some sort of game that's played by
I'm not lying to try to like get street cred. I actually don't even know who's in it. I walk the walk. I walk the walk. I don't even know who's in it. I've overheard from one person that the Chiefs are one of the teams, but I don't even know who they're playing.
I think the Washington Capitals will win. That's my bet on who will win. Jared, what are your final thoughts tonight?
That sounds good. We'll put all of our money on the Washington Capitals.
Yes.
That'll be wise. Well, everybody, the afterparty.tv is where you can find the catalog of past shows and all kinds of things. Sign up for our newsletter. Please do so. That is the most direct way to be in contact with us. The after party this Thursday, we welcome back Daughter of Albion. You may remember she was only on for about 10 minutes a couple of weeks ago. She had some tech issues, but that's all worked out now. So we will have our full conversation with Daughter of Albion. Very much looking forward to that. That's going to be at 4 Eastern, which is 9 in the evening across the pond in the UK. If you're a compatriot of hers and would like to listen, we do encourage that. My own site is thegreatorder.com. Of course, it also has the catalog of shows we do because it's a catalog of everything I do. It also has my own videos. It has past articles I've written, some t-shirts I've made, some art that I like to share, some poetry I've written, ways to contact me, ways to support, all kinds of things. But the whole world that's kind of grown out of these shows that we do, the live stream shows that Jason and I do together, related media and stuff that you make as well, community generated, which we're really excited about, is on the afterparty.tv. So please do spend a little time on both of our respective sites and our site together, the afterparty.tv. But that really is the best way with social media. We know social media is fickle. It's not going to be there forever. So that's the best way to grow everything. Increasingly, our activities will be around that. So stay tuned for more fun things coming up. We're very excited about this year, just getting kicked off to 2020. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. And do try to tune in to Tap with Daughter of Albion on Thursday and share it. You help us by sharing it, liking it all over your social media so that more people know about it, show up, invite friends. We always like new people showing up. And if you were new tonight, welcome. We're always glad to see new people.
And Jared, I will let you have the final word tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you all next time.